Greg Shelton here, your host of Metal, Steel Manufacturing and Business Pro podcast, where you learn everything about the industrial businesses that make your modern day life possible. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Metal, Steel Manufacturing and Business Pro podcast. Today we have Mike Harrod from all the way from Japan. And this guy has a lot of amazing things for me to learn about. And, in turn, that'll help you guys learn some things too. So welcome, Mike. Thank you for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Greg. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So tell me about yourself, sir. I mean, I know, but the listeners don't. So what got you to Japan?
Yeah, well, I'm not Japanese. I think I have to say that off the bat. Um, yeah, I'm English, born in England. Never had any aspirations to come to Japan when I was young. No interest in Japan particularly. And I've had a bit of a non-linear path as how I've got here at the moment. I never intended to be doing engineering as I am now. I never intended to be living in Japan and working for a Japanese company, but hey, I'm here. Things worked out that way, and the long and short of the story is working in England as a sound engineer. Decided I wanted to wrap that up. Went to university in Australia. Got interested in engineering as a career, looking at Japanese companies and thinking, oh, wow, these companies are really moving and wanting to be part of that. And decided, yeah, I'm going to work for a Japanese company and had that as a goal at graduation. Did a few language courses in Japan and entered a Japanese company, now working for a smallish company, but with a big reputation in near Osaka in Japan.
Okay. All right. So you went to school where?
I went to school in Melbourne, Australia, studying mechanical engineering.
Okay. Okay, cool. Mechanical engineering. So what got you interested in mechanical engineering?
I think like most boys of my age when growing up, you take things apart, you try and put them back together, and you see how all these little parts go together. And that kind of sticks with you, and you end up doing little plastic kits when you get a bit older, and you start playing with Lego and things like that, and you think, oh, how does that actually work? How does these things actually get connected, or how is this made? And that kind of like seeded with me as a young boy growing up,
Yeah.
and it's been a bit of a passion to design things and you know just really understand how things work, not just on a surface level, but on quite a deep level. I've always been quite intrigued by the fine details of how things are actually manufactured and put together.
Okay. All right. So was there anything that particularly interested you about putting things together? Like was there, parts that intrigued you more? Or like what was it about it? Like, I mean, it was the whole thing, or just was there specific parts that made you keen about it?
Yeah, you see how for example, how a car on the surface is a mode of transport,
Yeah.
but under the metalwork of the facade of the outside, it's a very complicated machine where every part has a designer, has a manufacturing process, and it has an assembly process, and it all comes together as a big moving, living, I would like to say a creature of some sort.
Yeah.
And I know it's quite strange to think about it that way, but that thing's got life. It's been designed by somebody. It's been tested by somebody. It's been manufactured by somebody. It's been through several people's hands to get to where it is now, and I find that fascinating. Like it's not just being plucked out of the ground. It's not being pulled from a tree. It's
Yeah.
been crafted by thought and by human hands or by machine, and I find that incredibly wonderful.
Yeah. Absolutely. I agree. And there's an intelligence to it, right? And it's almost like
It's intelligently designed.
it's a product of us humans, right? And
Absolutely.
that is amazing to see for sure. And our economy is, so dependent upon it, which is, great. It makes the wheels
Mm.
go around. um,
Oh, absolutely,
right.
absolutely. And something to add to that, look at take the car industry, especially in Japan, and you've mentioned the economy there. If the Japanese car industry doesn't move forward, it's not working, it's not producing cars, the Japanese economy will grind to a halt.
Hmm.
Quite simply, the all the companies related to the big car manufacturers in Japan would stop working. They'll stop all the production line would stop. And we saw a little bit of that with the corona outbreak. We saw the cogs starting to slow down. But really, if the big manufacturers stop selling cars,
Hmm.
the Japanese economy would probably falter very quickly.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, it's so a lot of the industry and then like the sub industry to that, like your subsectors and whatnot, they would all kind of feed into the car industry, right?
Absolutely, Greg. So you've got your big auto manufacturers, then you have everything below that, like tier one and tier two, as they're called,
Yeah.
and they're all working off the principle that the car's going to be made tomorrow, so we supply the parts just before they're going to make it, and so the sale of the car initiates the manufacture of the car, which initiates the purchase of the parts, and the
Mhm.
purchase of the parts initiates the manufacture of the parts, which initiates the next stage and the next stage and the next stage.
Hmm.
And because of the just in time philosophy of car manufacturing, that the signal of stop buying cars, of people stop buying cars, will very quickly flow onto the tier two, tier three, and the
Yeah.
subcontractors under that very, very quickly,
Yeah.
probably within a matter of months. Very small companies below the big car manufacturers start to
Yeah.
falter through
That's
lack of orders.
that's kind of scary in a way, right? I mean, does there is there any sign that Japan will diversify in its offering in GDP?
No,
Like, no way.
no,
That's it.
no.
The
Well,
cars.
they've gone into finance. Obviously, they've been into financial sectors for the last 30 years.
Right.
Um, but manufacturing is the big one in Japan. There's no doubt about that, and that's how they're basing their economy in the future.
Yeah.
It's it's the basis of the Japanese bond system. Like the Japanese economy is going to be based on the fact that Toyota, Honda, every other car manufacturer is going to be producing cars for the next 30 years, and that's how they're selling bonds on that fact.
Okay. So is it all export? I mean, and we have Toyota, right? I mean, is there any
Yeah.
domestic car brands that don't see the other shores, or is it just Toyota?
Oh no, there are domestic car brands in Japan which are primarily serving the Japanese market. So Daihatsu. Are you familiar with Daihatsu, Greg?
I've heard it. I've heard of it. I don't know much about it.
Well, it's a subsidiary of Toyota. They're the they produce the small what they call a K car.
Okay.
So that's a miniature version of a big car, I suppose, with a limited size, a limited engine capacity, and of course a limited emissions rating.
Mhm.
And they serve like the everyday car, like the small little runabout car, the type of car you probably wouldn't have in the States or in Europe. Maybe it's just too small, but maybe
Right.
going off like the Fiat 500 or something like that, that kind of idea,
Okay.
the little car to nip around the streets.
Yeah, yeah.
And Daihatsu, they produce cars, they produce work vans, and they're only popular in the domestic market.
Hmm. Interesting. Very cool. Okay, man. So let's back up a little bit. So
Yep.
what made you so interested in the Japan market, you personally? Like what brought you there? Was it more of a
Mm.
cultural thing for you to expand as a person, or was it like there's something about Japan manufacturing that attracted you?
Yeah, I think personally, I'm not really interested in Japan. Like, I don't have, I don't have a love of like comic books or anything like that, or I don't like anime or anything like that. I'm not interested in Japan really culturally, apart from the work culture maybe. And studying university, you look at doing case studies of companies, and these Japanese companies' names keep on popping up, like especially Toyota with their philosophy of manufacturing. And it's well, this Japanese company, they've got a, a work ethic, and it seems to be very very successful. And you do a bit more research, and well, actually, almost every large manufacturing company has been affected by this Toyota production system.
Absolutely.
And I found that as a logical thinking person to be quite a reassuring way of doing work. Like you go and work for a company and you've got a very set like system of how things go, and well, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Sure it
And
does.
all these like all these big companies which produce bearings, like rotating bearings and rotating equipment, like they're all Japanese, producing millions and millions of products which just go unnoticed in the world. Like every single Toyota car has got a set of bearings in them, like many multiple sets of bearings, and they just get completely unnoticed. But
Yep.
without them, the car stopped moving, and
Well, for
a
sure.
lot of
Yeah, man.
it's something that's completely underappreciated, I believe. So I was looking at these companies, thinking, oh, I want to go and work for a Japanese company. I'm going to get quite close to bearings. I want to perhaps work for a bearing manufacturer, and after doing a bit of research, I found the company I'm working now, and we use a lot of bearings in our products. And I've extensively studied bearings as part of my line of work because it's a very core part of our business.
Yeah.
And the intricacies of just bearings alone, if I could bore you for hours, Greg, but
Yeah, well, it's not boring to me, man. I mean, I feel that way about the whole metal industry is just underappreciated. People just take everything for granted. I mean, it's I just hop in my car and get to the next place and I can use my phone and I can connect to all my loved ones and
yeah.
but what makes that all possible is, the manufacturing industry, metal
Hmm.
industry.
Well,
And
when was the last time, Greg, you say you read a big newspaper and had a section about metalworking?
yeah, no, it doesn't happen.
Doesn't exist. Yeah.
Exactly.
You don't turn on the news one day and see like the metalworking hour. It doesn't
Or the
it doesn't
bearing
exist as a
hour.
mainstream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, no, I
But
I I agree.
such a core part of the how the world works is manufacturing and metals in every aspect, I think.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Cool, man. So you working for a bearing? Well, okay. So give us an idea. So you're working for a company, obviously, and you do
Yeah.
the bearing, like the engineering of the bearings, or how does all that work?
Yeah. So I work for a company producing rolling centers for lathe and turning equipment. So that's the part which goes opposite the chuck in a lathe and supports the work while you're turning long cylindrical parts. So um, we produce something which is a rotating unit, and the accuracy of what we work to is about 3 microns. So when the customer is using our product, they can expect to cut their work with a cylindricity and a total run out of 3 microns.
Okay.
So the design of those products and how they're put together and the thought processes of how they're manufactured becomes very important to the final quality of them. So
Okay. Okay. So and they're are they tier one or two or
we supply the tier one manufacturers. So um, we have direct relationships with a lot of the people producing axles, gearbox components, pretty much everything which rotates in a car.
yeah.
They're our customers. And as we go towards fully electric vehicles where you don't have gearbox components, you don't have complex linkages within an engine, you just get to a single motor shaft. They're our core focus at the moment. So every company making car motors for hybrid or electric cars, that's who we supply our product to.
Okay. All right. So did you find was it hard to get to working for Japan, like a Japanese company? Did you find that was a difficult task to do, coming in as a foreigner? What did it take to make that happen?
They said something quite interesting there, like coming in as a foreigner, like yeah, I'm from a different country. I speak a different language, and I
Yeah.
have a different background. But as an engineer, a lot of the things that I do as an engineer just cross those borders and blur the boundaries of nationality. Like an engineering drawing or a mechanical idea or a principle in physics is transcends a language.
Sure.
It is the part of engineering. So that's the magic about it. I could maybe not explain in detail how a certain principle of mechanical engineering works to a Japanese person. However, through the methods we apply in manufacturing or engineering, I could certainly propose drawings to explain my ideas, or I could show experiments to show those ideas. And those things which are maybe visual or use a different form of communication, they transcend every culture and every background difference.
Sure. Well, it's math, right? I mean, math transcends everything.
Exactly,
It's
exactly. Using the same set of symbols, using the same numbers. It doesn't matter if it's a Japanese person, English person, a American person, a somebody from space. Those laws of physics still apply in every country and every
yeah,
dimension.
yes.
So using the maths and using the drawings to explain that is just it's freeing. So
Yeah, man. Cool. So what kind of metals are you guys using in the bearings? Is there any like specialty metals that, have higher tensiles or higher Rockwell or
yeah, so there is a certain type of steel which they call bearing steel.
okay.
I know the Japanese standard is SUJ,
Right.
so it's my specialist steel for bearings. So you see it a lot in almost all rotating parts, but bearing steels, it's come a long way, Greg, and I think the science behind how bearings are manufactured and how they're ground and how they're put together has really changed the game in terms of how people are using bearings in products. So I don't know if you're familiar, Greg, with what they call the bearing life cycle equation.
I don't. I'm not. I'd love to learn though.
So basically, a bearing's life can be determined by how much load and how fast that bearing's being used and under what conditions it's being used. So there's a simple equation in classical books which say if you spin a bearing at this speed for this amount of time, it's going to last this life until parts of the internal race of the bearing start to flake off or a defect of some sort occurs. That's been well studied since the invention of bearings. However, through the advent of material science, and especially on the use of electron microscopes in material science, the traditional bearing equation is just complete garbage. Like real bearings in real situations are lasting multiple times longer than the calculations predicted.
Okay.
And I know, Greg, as you're someone who's very interested in materials,
Yeah.
like that science of just how those materials are being put together now and how they're being developed is is revolutionizing. And that's maybe a joke there, maybe talking about bearings and revolutions, but it's revolutionizing the actual um, designs of rotating equipment.
So let me ask a high level question. So, I mean, I
Yep.
always hear North Americans say, oh, well, they design that to fail. They design that to, to break so that they can make the money from repeat parts or taking it to the shop. Do you think that's true in your experience?
I'm going to just go talk directly about bearings here, Greg.
Yeah.
Bearings are not designed to fail.
Okay.
They're designed to live longer than everything else around it,
Yeah.
or as long. Sorry, not longer, as long.
As long. Okay.
Your wheel bearings in your car are
Yeah.
designed to live for the entire life of that car
Okay.
until some other part breaks from fatigue. So just talking about bearings, they
Yeah.
will last as long as the car.
Okay.
For other items, yes, there's I believe, and I don't believe it's out of like cynicism or I don't believe it's out of bad ethical practices, but things are designed to fail.
But now,
And
is that for safety reasons or is that for profitable reasons?
well, I think if you talk about profitable reasons, I think that you start to talk about ethics
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, you do.
Um, However, things are designed to have a life cycle, and that life cycle um, is maybe not based on customer expectations, and that could be that could be quite a cynical thing to say, but
That's good.
I don't believe things are just designed to fail for profitability reasons. I think they're designed to fail probably because the life cycle is, mm, and I think maybe this is a controversial decision. Maybe the life cycle of most products is perhaps, well, historically too long, I think. And you might think, what's that about? Like, but old cars,
Yeah.
they've got such a long life cycle
Hmm.
just because they were over engineered. They're engineered to without the knowledge we have now. And maybe with a modern car, they're engineered to last for maybe 10 years. And that's when they start to require more resources to keep them going. So,
Yeah.
okay, this is profitability, you could say. So a car company does not want to have to support the life cycle after that 10-year period. Whereas old car manufacturers, they don't have to I don't know. Actually, they have to kind of think about the fact they've still got these old cars running around not breaking down. I suppose that lives on in the name of the brand, but it
Yeah.
can be a burden in some
There's
situations.
there's so many variables to that for sure. I mean, there's the whole financing part of it too. I mean, I know that
Absolutely.
you're probably right. 10 years is probably about a good time that a car would last this day and age, but you've got your 8 year and your 10 year financing. Sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 8, and you're still paying for the next car when you get a new one. So, I mean, I don't think we're qualified to talk about that, but I just thought I'd ask, you
So
know.
I'll give you the example which makes me think this, and it's something which is quite close to me at the moment. I use a lot of lathes and turning equipment.
Mhm.
So one big Japanese brand, they started making a very successful lathe in the late 1980s, and they were built like brick outhouses. Like they're strong,
Yeah.
the motors are powerful, and they're still going today in so many factories. But as a result of producing such a good lathe, the company was kind of held back in terms of development because they're still supporting the parts and the servicing for those lathes that got out on the on the production floors in so many factories
Yeah.
that it becomes a burden to them.
Mhm.
So the company I'm specifically talking about, they offer lifetime support. So it doesn't matter how long you lose that piece of equipment for, they will still be able to supply the parts. And so that becomes a burden on the company. They've still got to have inventory for that, or the manufacturing capacity to meet those customers' demands. And even at my factory, I've got one of those lathes turning work every single day, doesn't miss a beat. We
Yeah.
occasionally get a electrical breakdown or something, or we have to replace a memory unit or something. And the service techs just come and they rub their heads and they're like, oh no, this is going to be a nightmare to try and get this part in
Yeah.
within the service window.
Yeah.
So
So
in
what's
this in this situation here, I think they designed them a little bit too well. So the company are definitely held back in terms of
yeah.
they don't have the ability to um, advance as quickly as maybe a company producing something with a fixed lifestyle of only 10 years, a life cycle of only 10 years.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, there's definitely some North American brands that did that at one time too. I think General was one of them.
Okay.
They would make things just, very robust, and then, they're still operating today. But
Mm.
yeah, same sort of thing. But the nice thing about that is, a guy that's handy can make it work. Where
Yeah,
a
yeah,
lot of
absolutely.
products today, are just not made as well. So it's all about price. It's all about the throwout economy, right?
But
Um,
just to reiterate my belief that I don't think things are built intentionally to fail quickly,
okay, okay,
and
cool.
that's I'd stand by that quite strongly.
Well, there's a lot there to talk about. I mean, we won't because it would take days to talk about that. Like it's more about like a belief, a fundamental belief. Do you believe people are good or do you believe people are bad? Anyway, that's a whole other conversation. But what's the culture in Japan though? Like, I mean, when you're working with these people in the shop floor, and I mean, they recognize they have a good piece of equipment. You do too. Like, what's their philosophy on life? Is it a throwaway economy like it is here in North America, or is it like let's make it work because we've got a good piece of equipment, and like their standards on day-to-day work, like what's that like for them as a culture?
Yeah, so you've mentioned two quite interesting things there, Greg. How Japanese people value items is maybe a little bit different from other cultures, and to speak quite broadly here,
Hmm.
but yeah, people understand that you've got something nice like a good lathe or a good bit of equipment, and we're going to look after that thing and like keep it up to spec and keep it looking nice and keep it easy to use. Don't let it degrade. And I think that's seen quite a lot in Japanese culture. Maybe people tend to appreciate the historical and maybe more cultural important items. And yeah, there's a lot of people think, oh yeah, that's quite good. We won't let this go to waste. We won't just throw this away right now. We'll keep on using it, or we'll fix it up and make it good. But the other time, this is a capitalist society where like you go to a 100 yen shop with the equivalent of a dollar store, I suppose, and just buy plastic crap and it goes into the ocean. Like there's two quite jarring like aspects there. There's one thing which is we're going to look after this and keep it looking nice and keep it running, and we're going to appreciate its beauty as a whole historical item, and the other things like we're just going to throw it away. So
Right. Okay.
it's two aspects there,
There's like
and
a juxtaposition kind of thing.
exactly. But
Yeah.
in terms of like machine tools, like we look after them really well. Like they
So,
make
so
us money.
when it
That's an
comes
investment.
when it comes to tooling, I mean, you guys are all well, and this comes to like a broader question of,
Yeah.
what's Japan's philosophy like on domestic, or I mean, you export a lot, but I mean, and that's just automotive, but what is kept internally within the country? Like machine tools, are the metals produced there? That sort of.
Um, yeah, there's definitely metal refineries.
Mhm.
There's metal production. Um, Obviously, we don't in Japan have the resources and the raw materials to be taken out the ground here. So we rely on import for all primary resources of all metal products, and that's something which Japan kind of quite closely protects at the kind of government level, and also because quite it's an island country with a
Mhm.
quite an inward-looking philosophy. People very much appreciate the Japanese products, things made in Japan. So imported cars are very rare. Like you get some European cars, or the very rarely you'll see an American car, but like 99% of cars on the road here are Japanese made.
Mhm.
Or electrical equipment in your house, like everything I see around me here is made in Japan.
Mhm.
Um, Clothing, people appreciate Japanese brands otherwise rather than foreign brands. So
Mhm.
it's definitely buy Japan first, and that's just not what people say. It's ingrained in culture to
Okay.
buy the Japanese item. Don't import it. Buy the Japanese items. So that's something very Japanese, I think.
Yeah. Do you think that's a good thing for the country, or I mean,
It,
good is pretty broad, but I mean, do you think?
hmm,
Um,
it keeps the it keep, I suppose it keeps the Japanese things Japanese.
mhm.
It keeps traditions and heritage. quite tight,
Good.
but it can feel, especially as a foreigner, like quite isolated here. When everything is Japanese, then you don't get the diversity that you might get in other Asian countries, especially like Malaysia or Singapore, where it's very mixed culture. You have a lot of different imported items, and everything's quite mixed together, very, very homogenous in Japan. And I think that's Japanese people don't quite see outside of that homogenation, like they don't see outside of that similarity. Like if things come from a different country, they stand out, and people don't like to stand out in Japan.
Okay. All right. Um, so you see that in the workplace then, like most people are,
Absolutely.
this is this is my job and that's what I do. And there's
Yeah, absolutely. People don't like to stand out at work. People don't like to stand out in public. And going back to uh, like the workplace and how people treat the things around them, like people are very interested in looking after their area or their process, or they don't kind of look into what other people are doing too much. They want to be feel like they're imposing on other people.
Mhm.
So it can feel definitely as a foreigner very antisocial at work.
Okay. Okay.
People are very focused on what they're doing, but at the same time, it's extremely productive. Like people get what their speciality, they've got their speciality, and they do what they do very, very well. So the guy from the soaring department, he doesn't look at what the guy from the turning department's doing. He just cuts his work, does it perfectly every time, gets it done, um, and can walk away not feeling like he's imposed on anybody else at the end of the day, and come back in the next day and do it the same thing again, again, and again, and again. And
Yeah.
it can, I personally feel that people are lacking maybe drive at the workplace to go to succeed, to grow. However, maybe just
There,
my aspirations are different from Japanese people or different people I work with. So
yeah, well, I would imagine, the Western and Eastern definition of success maybe are different. I'm guessing. I don't know. Um,
well, say Greg, your experience, like I imagine you've worked with a lot of different people. And have you ever worked as like the kind of person who's a young gun, like he's asking all the questions, or he's getting everybody's way just to succeed? How do you know this type of person?
yes, absolutely. Yes. Yeah,
Like
I've
that
been
person doesn't exist in Japan.
Oh no. Okay.
No.
Okay.
That kind of up and coming young guy, he's already getting squashed. Like he's not
Already
going to stand out.
he's already been
Not going
dealt
to
with.
get in him. He's not going to get anybody else's way.
So where do you
So
think that starts in the school system or even
I
before?
believe it starts in the school system.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite a negative view of mine. And it's one reason why I don't want my children to enter the Japanese school system, because I feel it quite depressive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
People stick to their track and don't leave it.
Yeah.
And it's quite strict in some respects.
Yeah.
Mm.
Is there
But
is
as you grow up into I'm sorry to interrupt there, Greg. As you
oh,
grow up into the society and you get a job, that pressures doesn't change. It's the same pressure of be normal, fit in, don't stand out, that you get from school all the way to finishing your career, I suppose.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, that is yeah. If that's not what you want, then that could be difficult. Yeah. Um, so what's the in the workplace? Like are there trades in Japan? They like are there machinists and as an official trade? Do they have that?
As a job title, yes.
Okay.
And I'm not quite sure of what the qualifications are to call yourself a machinist. I think people have finished trade school and they've had experience working for a company. They can then call themselves a machinist of some sort. And I can't get into the details of that because I'm not
So,
fully versed on the Japanese education system and
sure.
how career progression works here. But I know that there's certain trades which are protected, same as you have in North America.
Okay.
and other things which are quite loose and they don't have a defined um, kind of set of
Yeah,
qualifications that you need to call yourself that certain job.
we have that
I
too.
know for things like an engineer, that has a qualification that you have to have graduated a certain school or a certain level of education. But I think things like a technician, that comes down to the title you're given when you get a job.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. Well, the reason I asked that, I was just curious, where you work. I mean, that's a pretty small portion of the population, but I'm just curious, are there younger people coming into that, company to work? And how is that received? Like, are the workers willing to teach what they know or not?
So, especially with my work, where it's manufacturing and we are using lathes, grinders, mills, the young people aren't really interested in that kind of work, unfortunately. And we've had a bit of difficulty over the last, say, 3 years of finding fresh blood
Hmm.
to replace those older guys moving out. So we have to look for alternative technologies or alternative processes where we can continue the level of production we do with reduced headcount.
Yeah.
So, for example of that would be we've automated a core level of the system where the day-to-day running of the business is really hands off. And I mean, like, you can go to work and all the instruction sheets are printed and all those things which used to take a desk clerk or maybe take the first hour of your day, it's already done for you or on an automation level. And that's a like software problem. That's
Yeah.
not a human problem. That's a software challenge. So
Yeah.
one thing I was very interested in was automating my job. And I think it's something everybody should be interested in doing, even
Absolutely.
if you're an accountant, even if you're a teacher, if you're a welder, if you're a, I don't know, you've got even something which is an artistic background.
Hmm.
If you automate those parts of your job which make working a chore, you can focus on those things which make it enjoyable or
Hmm.
focus on those things which make you successful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you take away the pain and
Yeah.
replace it with a line of programming script,
Yeah.
and then you have the opportunity and the time to become a more successful engineer, dancer, welder, teacher, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree, Mike. And it's a mindset change. I find, like, one company I worked with where we were going to implement an ERP, which is your software company, right? Or not
Yeah,
your software company, but your software system to
yeah,
automate a lot of those things you're talking about. And the philosophy was exactly what you're saying. Why don't we automate all this stuff that a monkey could do? And this way you can add value in places that you are good at, right? The same thing
yeah.
you're saying, but they didn't get it. And that's okay. That's fine. That was partially my fault. I didn't explain it well enough, but I agree. So that what is it that can make the younger people interested in coming into the manufacturing industry? I also want to hear about how you're automating your job, but I'm curious what your thoughts are around bringing AI and machine learning and internet of things into the workplace, and does that create interest for a younger generation to come into manufacturing?
Yeah, so I think to attract the younger generation, you've got to make the work safe and you've got to make it clean. And if you get those two things right, you get it more visually appealing and appealing in terms of safety that you're going to go home with, make sure you got all your fingers and you're not going to get hurt at work. And like my work's safe, but this has its dangers. But once you remove those dangers
Yeah.
and you make it clean and tidy, you start to get people's interest. And the image of manufacturing, I think it's tainted of through years of it being portrayed badly on TV or in films or whatever. Like
Mhm.
you you go to quite a lot of machine shops now and they're very clean and they
Yeah.
have to be. like especially where I'm working, like a single grain of dust or a single hair is going to affect the outcome of our product. And we're not producing like things to the nanometer level. We're producing things to the micron level. But even at that micron level, like we keep everything clean, tidy, make sure we know where things are, and we put them back where they belong. And that image hasn't quite seeped out into society yet. People still see engineering and manufacturing as a dirty job, when in the reality, high tech manufacturing, which I think grabs a lot of young people's attention, is very clean, very tidy, and safe. And it has these different challenges. They're not just like build this mechanical system or turn this wrench or hit this with a hammer. It's how do we solve this problem using technology, not just brute force anymore, not just sweat and brawn. We've got an opportunity to solve these engineering problems with now complex technology. And you've mentioned a few things there like machine learning or AI. And a lot of old timers in the industry of manufacturing or especially in machining, they're like, well, AI and machine learning, they're going to take our jobs. And I think as soon as you plug in the computer, all the ones and zeros are going to fly out and suddenly the paycheck's going to disappear.
Yeah.
When the reality is, you start introduce things like at the core level automation, and then you start looking at AI, and then you start looking at machine learning. They take away the pain of the job. They take away the difficulties that you have, and they start to allow very clever and complex solutions which allow businesses to grow a lot faster. And that's what's quite attractive to young people, I think, when they could see a company grabbing this technology and it exploding.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And I would hope that that is exciting, to come into a company and let's take this manual process and turn it into an automated process. Like, I don't know. That's exciting to me. It's exciting to you, but I don't know how you get people excited about that. I guess it's just, you know, talking about it, creating awareness. I mean,
I
maybe.
think something which I've picked up a little bit on the news recently is the gamification
Uh,
of manufacturing. So your parts per hour become a goal, like you would have in a strategy game, or
mhm.
your whatever your KPIs are going to be, like some metric to which you like skill up or you get some certain reward. And once it becomes a bit of a game for some people, they accept that challenge and they want to take it to the next level.
That's
Like
a great point. I like
you
that.
don't just take the the just the financial things, because the financial things bore some people. It it kind of worries some people. You take those little numbers which we use in our industry and you make them into a little bit of a challenge or a game. And how do we improve those things? How do we
Mhm.
refine those processes to make those numbers better? Like how can I level up in a certain aspect? And I think doesn't that sound fun?
Yeah, it does. I'm writing it down because I want to just kind of do some more research on that. That's cool, man. No, it's a great idea, and I don't know why it's not happening. Maybe it's just because we're in its infancy and we're going through such a transition right now. We've got, baby boomers are retiring in droves, and we're at a point in the world where our population just isn't there to sustain the replacement of all that.
Yeah.
So we have to automate.
Mm.
It's imperative. We have to. And the hardest part is getting people excited about manufacturing. But I really like that idea. The gamification is that's cool. I got to
Well,
put
I
a lot of
think
thought to
we've
that.
seen the gamification of programming of computer science that's
Hmm.
already been gamified.
Hmm.
And it's programming and computer science is very attractive to young people. And that hasn't kind of stepped over into the manufacturing world yet, but I think it will. And I think because the software engineering and the manufacturing world, they are neatly combining themselves together at the moment.
Yeah,
That these concepts of machine learning, AI, that were realistically, they're already here.
they are.
They just they haven't just quite exploded. I know so many companies sitting on technology at the moment that's going to just revolutionize the manufacturing world. Like there's, I know I could probably list about 10 companies now who have a product waiting in the wings, which are using AI or machine learning, which is just going to change the game of the basic things of manufacturing. And
Right.
that's making part from making a part from raw stock. I know 10 companies which are going to change that game in the next, maybe in the next year to 2 years, 3 years, maybe.
Yeah, let me ask you a bit more about that. So is that like additive and subtractive, or is that materials, or is it a system that they're creating to change pricing, or like, I don't want to pry too much because I'm guessing it's not common knowledge, but
And I think there are
curious.
things. If you went and searched for this technology,
Mm.
it is some things are available. Just because those research papers came out 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and the core research is already finished. It's just putting those things into a product.
Okay.
So the information is there, but the basics of manufacturing, of turning something into something else
Hmm.
through subtractive manufacturing, additive manufacturing, whatever, those those are not going to change so much. We still need to make part A from resource B.
Yeah.
So, and not to get into any single process or any single manufacturing step, but if you take the pain out of that process, the things which are difficult or the things which rely on skilled humans to do, it becomes just a numbers game. It just becomes a logical maths problem.
Hmm. Hmm.
And some things which take human intuition or a bit of human, I don't know, uh, the feeling of manufacturing something, you can just get rid of those in some respects and just turn that into something a computer can calculate or something a camera can see and then make a assumption based on an artificial intelligence model. Like we don't have to rely on the human factor anymore in manufacturing. We won't soon, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. So the motivation behind these ones you're talking about, is it about monetary, or is it about, progress in manufacturing? Or what's your thoughts, or is it about proprietary? We have a patent and you don't.
I think there is a bit of we've got a patent you don't, or we're using a technology and you can't have it, or if you want to use it, you can pay us. I think that exists.
Yeah.
But getting the skilled labor is becoming a problem.
Mhm.
Um, the decisions a manufacturing company need to make on a daily basis are getting more complex, or for them to be profitable, they're becoming more complex. So your basic ERP system isn't doesn't stand up to the manufacturing challenges of today, I believe. Like the old style of the logic based ERP systems, they're just outdated, in my opinion, Greg. You need some type of artificial intelligence in there, and even some basis of machine learning to pick up things within your industry, in your manufacturing scope, to make more complex decisions than what a basic ERP system could do.
Okay.
So it's profit. It's the reason companies are investing is because it's money. Firstly, it
Yeah.
might be a technology which works for them, so they invest in the development of it, and then if it becomes a product, then they sell it. So a lot of the technologies I'm thinking about, they were based upon the need for that company to find a solution to a problem they had in house. So they weren't looking to sell a product to start with. They were looking to solve a problem they had with their production themselves. So
So
it's
not,
exciting.
yeah, it is exciting. Everything's exciting, man. But I would, I'm not curious. I don't know how to ask this, but do you think capitalism works? because that's so debated right now. I mean, and what I'm getting at is,
Oh,
I know,
oh,
I
great.
know, I know, I
That's a
know,
hard question.
I know it is because, and I don't know the answer either. I have my own beliefs, but I believe there's an incentive through profit to improve a system or a cycle or a company's whatever it is to make a more profit. But what comes from that is progress in an industry. So how would you get that progress otherwise? I guess is the question. I'm
That's
curious what
food
you
for
think.
thought.
You don't have to have an answer. I'm just think about that.
Well, I don't know how to answer that. Like, I'm not qualified as a
Either am I.
in any way to answer that question. But what I could say, I don't want to go back bartering for turnips. I don't want to just I don't have to take my bag of potatoes to the shop to go and buy a pot of milk. I don't want to go. I don't want that to be a thing. I I live off. Unfortunately, I do live off consumerism, capitalism.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I'm sitting here in front of a screen next to my phone, next to my flask, and I've got items all around me produced in factories all over the world, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite ready to go back to the old days of not having capitalism. But I think capitalism and globalism,
Mm,
they're very neatly tied in together. I
mhm.
like I don't like the idea of globalism. I like capitalism on a more smaller scale, I suppose, or within a certain reach, I suppose. That kind of makes me happy, I suppose.
Yeah, well, that's good. It's good to be happy. Well, I would say that globalism is being stress test. I mean, it has been through COVID, right? And,
Absolutely.
certainly we learned a lot about that, that it doesn't work as well as we'd hoped. So there's lots of talk of deglobalization,
Yep.
and um, I don't know if that's good or bad. We'll see what happens. But so back to your automating your job.
Yep.
So how are you going about that? Like, what is it that you're what's your motivation and how are you doing it?
But my motivation is I want to go to work. I want to make exciting things. I want to make a new product, or I want to do something fresh and new. I don't want to sit there and sit in front of a computer and enter data into spreadsheets or whatever. That doesn't excite me. Like, what excites me is making things, developing things, and seeing something in my hand at the end of the day. So
Mhm.
I don't want to be a slave to the engineering work. I want to be a slave to the making thing. I want to enjoy the making of things.
Yeah.
So the heart of what I suggest for people looking into automation is learn to automate small things yourself and look at using um, things like Python to do so. Look at how to build little applications to calculate something or to automate a certain task on your computer. It just has to be small things, Greg. Like, I'm not talking about automating your entire job, just doing automate that
Yeah.
one thing you do every morning just to make that day run a little bit quicker.
Hmm.
So automate your email inbox to kick out the junk and get the emails you need to the front as quick as you can,
Hmm.
or automate that reporting. So you want to print out your little data report, have that already done for you when you walk into the office. Like, learn the little Python script to open the application and enter the details and print out that form, or even things we don't need to learn a programming language, like learn how to set up your Windows computer so that when you log on, all the windows that you use every day come pop up already. And just by doing those little things, you save yourself a couple of minutes every day,
Hmm.
and you start to learn all the other little places around your life you can automate. So say for example, you finish work and you think, oh, I've got to go and turn off all the lights in this room now. Oh, can that be automated? And you research a bit about that, and yeah, I can automate the lights in this building, or can I automate the data collection from these machines? And you research a bit about that again, and oh, you need to learn this language system, or you need to learn um, this communication protocol. And it becomes these little steps, Greg, of you see a problem and you don't realize that can be automated in a lot of cases. And then it becomes
So
a little bit of a game, a little
Mike,
bit of a game. And I go
Mike,
back to gamification here, that
yeah.
can I make that day a little bit faster? Can I save that 5 minutes? Do I have to write the notes down from that meeting, or can I find a way to automate that as well?
Mhm.
And then once you automate all those little things, and you're quite confident with a language, a programming language, or you're quite confident with maybe how to use Excel proficiently, the big challenge is you can eat them up really quickly.
Mhm.
So something which I've been working on maybe for the last year is the automation within our department of machining, is to send and receive the programs to the machine as the job is ordered through the ERP system, and do all that scheduling completely automatically. So, and that's because I don't want to have to do that job anymore. I know a computer can do that for me,
Yeah.
and so that 15 minutes every day, or that 20 minutes every day I was scheduling, it's completely automated. All the programs get sent to the machines automatically. All the days reporting gets taken from the machines automatically. The what tools get used, what materials need to be delivered to each department is already it's done for me. And I can focus on that, either the firefighting which goes on in the manufacturing workspace, or this is not working, quickly go and fix it, or I can focus on making that little gizmo I want to make, or making that thing work a little bit faster, or focus on the next automation project, which is quite often what I do.
So it becomes like a lifestyle, looking for ways
Ah,
to automate.
I don't want to be like this automation guru, and I don't set myself up to be that,
Oh no,
but
no, no. Just, but I mean,
you
it's fun.
find
It's fun
it
to
addictive.
thing. Yeah, I agree. So how hard is Python to learn?
I originally actually started with I think C back in maybe high school, and that was just because there was something I needed to make which involved C programming, and I didn't enjoy it at that time. And then maybe the 2000 something, this Python came along and was on the internet, um, like message boards, people talking about Python and sharing these Python products. And in fact, it's easy to read Python, in my opinion, to read through the lines and what everything mean, the way it goes together. It's quite a intuitive syntax. And once you get through the hello world, and you get through the basic maths kind of problems you have with every program language, it becomes more of a, I don't know, just a way of thinking, or maybe another way of expressing yourself. And when it comes to programming, and I found Python to be the most intuitive for me. And teaching people Python as well, or teaching people the little automation tasks using Python, like, I get quite good feedback of people learning it, like, that makes sense, or like, oh, the way that's written, I could read that and not understand the underlying mechanics of how it works. And I think that's quite important, especially for new people. They don't want to see lots of symbols, or they don't want to see a certain method of writing which it doesn't make any sense from the bat. They want to see something familiar. And I'm not here to advertise Python whatsoever. I believe you can program in any language you want, and you can achieve the same task in 100 different ways. But
Mhm.
personally, Python, I feel, is the closest to automation more than any other programming language. Like, you can very quickly automate things on your computer using Python without going to a lot of laborious detail. All those packages which you use for Python, they're already there for you. I'm
Right.
I'm just standing on the shoulder of giants, just
Yeah. And
fulfilling my needs, really.
yeah. Well, we all are. for sure. So I mean that's all open source, right? Like people can just find that on the internet anywhere.
Yeah, open source, and I suppose when you start using it for industry, as long as you don't start making products to sell, you're fine by a lot of standards. You I think the most one of the most daunting things about learning a programming language is all this um, kind of like fluff language people use around it, like Python. Why is it called Python? Why is it not called like programming language number one or something like that? It's got a silly name to it, and
Right.
a
Right.
lot of these packages have got silly names to it. Like what's chocolatey, or like why are they talking about Weebles or something like that? Like, oh, that drives me up the wall. If people start using their own little crazy words to describe stuff, but it's the way it was developed, Greg. Like it's developed by individuals who all put the flavor into it or make it open source. So at the moment we're stuck with a whole vocabulary of just nonsense when it comes to downloading the packages or using the packages. But the what happens within those packages and what happens when you're using those packages, it's quite logical.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool, man. So tell me about since you're in the country, Kobe Steel. What happened there?
Uh, so I think that kind of made news around most of Europe and America at the time. It's something which in I was not working in Japan when it was a big problem, but I in the wake of the Kobe steel scandal, it, a lot of things were shaking up in the industry for a long time.
Mhm.
So, for anybody who's listening and they don't quite know the background of it, like Kobe Steel, it's the third largest metals producer in Japan. So they do everything from, of course, steel to aluminium, copper, into your more exotic metals, and a lot of high tech metals for wafer design and computer chip technology. But their core product is steel, copper, aluminium. So very big company, very well respected company, 100 and something years of history,
Well,
um, and they were throughout 2000s, early teens, like very profitable and pushing the industry, getting making things cheaper, getting resources on hand quicker, and throughout the boom of the late 2000, maybe about 2010, maybe, and going into the early teens, of when manufacturing was on a bit of a high in Japan. Like they were flying and they were meeting orders and um, fulfilling everything 100% spot on.
mhm.
And it came out in 2017 that things were a little bit too good. Like, how was this Japanese steel producer, metals producer, fulfilling all these orders and so profitable? And it turns out, Greg, they were lying. They were falsifying data for their materials.
Yeah.
They all they wanted to do was make profit and get new customers and beat the Chinese to the next customer.
Hmm. Hmm.
And they completely unethical what they did. They falsified their lab reports for the strengths of materials. I think there was like 600 cases, and this is the data from this is self-reported. They used an external auditor to go back throughout their history to check how things were falsified. But for about 40 years, I believe, in about 600 cases,
Oh my.
the reporting data for the materials they were sending to customers was falsified.
So they're doing that for 14 years?
For 40, Greg. That's 40.
40 years. Four
Yes.
zero.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Or
So
the methods through which they falsified their data had been going for decades, for 40 years, I've heard.
so how does that go back? I mean, all the people that bought that have to have, quality controlled materials and, are going into products. Like how did that all pan out, you know?
So nationally, I think there was 450 cases of bad products going into customers' hands. And
Yeah.
of course, those customers are all producing cars, trains, boats, um, you name it. And I don't have to name the companies, but you already know the companies. Like they all had this bad product on their hand, and it's already gone into cars which they put on the road. It's already gone into the axles of trains that they put out onto the tracks, and it's
Mhm.
already in the system. And this comes back to how they falsified it. Were they producing an inferior product? That's hard to say because there haven't been any proven cases of the bad product going into circulation and causing a catastrophic problem. There's been no like big news stories of this broke because they used some poor steel from this company. That hasn't meet the headlines. However, every company who used that product or used that aluminium, used that copper, used that steel over that time period has to go back and retrospectively check all their products which use that material,
Man, oh
which
man.
is at great cost.
Oh yeah.
Includes recalling products, includes um, a lot of hassle to their customers. So people on the street who have got a car, they have to take it in to be tested, or they have to have a certain product a part replaced because it can't meet the guarantee of how it was manufactured. So it it very quickly became this a bit of a witch hunt in terms of finding all the things that Kobe still did wrong. But it also gave a lot of companies a chance to go through how they do this quality inspection, how they go through their customer and supplier chain and make sure that the quality is met. But scary stuff,
Yeah.
there's cars out there with inferior brake parts, there's trains out there with inferior bogies.
Man, oh man, that's ridiculous. That's awful. So what's the steel? What's going on with them now? Did they
So
go
there's
bankrupt or
oh, the massive concern. The water went under the bridge and
oh they got
they
bailed out?
still no, they didn't get bailed out. They
Or
they
just
very
whatever.
they very quickly turned it into let's find all the problems with our company, not just the quality assurance problems. Let's find the bad apples in management. Let's find the processes if we can't contain all the variables. And they really rooted out some big problems with the company and turned over their upper management and got things back on track. And
Well, that's good.
I've heard from a lot of different people on the ground about this subject. There's a lot of people who buy their steel or use their steel or directly involved, and they said that they had 2 or 3 years of while all this news was coming out of much uncertainty, not just uncertainty of we've been done over by a company, but also where are we going to get steel now? Where are we going to get it from? If this company dries up, we're not going to get steel. We can't make our product. So there was uncertainty there, and then people realizing, well, they've turned it around quite nicely, and they've set out this framework of how they intend to meet quality assurance standards, and that kind of trust relationship was built back up quite fast.
Good.
But
Yeah, that would be a challenge. I mean, where would we get our metal? I mean, that would be then there's no competition.
we got three big suppliers in Japan. Kobe still being um, probably the closest one to a lot of uh, customers of everyday products. Like Kobe still sells the casting material to the um, block manufacturers for engines. They don't just sell, they're not selling ore and they're not just dealing in metals. They are selling to the customers to make the product. So,
Hmm.
or they're selling copper to the pipe manufacturer. They're not just selling ore to the person which deals it to then deal it to somebody else. So, in terms of being close to the customer, they're probably number one. But so that how can I say to get your hands on raw materials to use straight away, there was only one real company, and that was Kobe Steel. If it was ore, you could probably I don't know find a lot of different sources, but in terms of raw product, there was Kobe Steel mm, was pretty much unrivaled, and that's one thing they kind of they got brought up in their court case in the discovery is how much of a monopoly they had on certain aspects of the business and how much their business model
Right.
through this scandal
Yeah.
was to maintain those customer relationships to advance that
Mhm.
customer customer focused business model.
Yeah. Was it a public company or private company?
It's a public company, publicly traded. So after the news broke, I think the share price dropped significantly. They dropped by about a third, I think, in the first week, and then after a lot of discovery and people actually, they kind of falsified this data as well, and they falsified this. It continued to drop, but it got a lot of support from the big auto manufacturers after that because they had this plan to turn around and they focus very much on their quality assurance for the future, not just saying sorry.
Yeah. Well, that's good. At least they're taking action. That's the main thing. Huh. Well, there you go. Cool, man. Well,
It's
I
been a it's been a journey. I
it's
don't.
been a journey, man.
Yeah,
Well, you know what? I've got so much more, but I've got to close it up. But
yeah.
you open to doing it again?
I'm absolutely open to do this again, Greg. It's been
Cool,
great
man.
fun to speak with you. I
Yeah.
want to ask you more questions in the future. I'm sorry it's been very one directional here.
Oh, that's okay. It's all good, man. No worries. I asked a lot of questions, and that's just how I do things. But I appreciate your time. Do you have any last advice for anybody? And I have another question after that too.
Our last advice, just be
Yeah.
persistent.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
Set goals for yourself and work towards those goals. Even if it's a little thing, just keep on working towards those goals. And that's how you succeed. And that's how I've succeeded as an engineer, just being persistent.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, thank you for that. And what book has had the most impact on you? And it could be anything, man. It doesn't have to be manufacturing. It could be maybe you don't read. I don't know. Maybe it's an article. I don't know.
No, I love factory physics.
Factory physics.
Did you know this book?
I don't know this book.
So it's my factory physics for managers. I think the full title is like Factory Physics for Managers in a Post-Lean, Post-Six Sigma World.
Yeah.
Um, and the author escapes me now, or the authors escape me now, but it's a very down-to-earth book talking about how these lean concepts or these Six Sigma concepts perhaps don't work so well in industry, or perhaps how they do work well, and really breaks down a lot of manufacturing principles into mathematical problems which can be solved by computers rather than just applying a cookie cutter solution to every manufacturing product.
Wow,
So
that
definitely worth reading.
man, that would be definitely worth the read because lean's very interesting to me. But
And
adding
I tell you what, this is a very long conversation. I don't like lean.
how is that right?
Yeah,
Okay. But I do like the spin on it where how you can add technology in to make the process better. That's cool. Yeah, so
yeah,
next time we'll talk about lean. How's that?
that'll be cool.
All right, Mike. Well, I appreciate your time so much.
It's
And
been fun, Greg.
yeah, man, it has been, and we're doing it again. Okay. I'll let you.
Excellent. Thanks very much.
Yeah, no problem. And I'll let you know when it comes out. Thank you and have an awesome day.
You too. Take
Okay.
care.